They say every monster starts as an idea. Somewhere a long time ago, somebody looked at the dark woods, heard a howl that didn't sound quite right, and their brain filled in the blanks. What if something is out there? And what if it's not entirely human? Now imagine this. What if that same question didn't just live in folklore or horror movies or campfire stories? What if it lived inside the Pentagon in a conference room? Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Broadcasting Seeds. I am your host, Bennett Tanton. And today we're talking about, we're going to dig into one of the most unsettling ideas I've ever come across. Project Cerberus, the Pentagon's werewolf bloodline experiment. Anyway, now before we go any further, let me level with you straight up. This is speculation. I mean, speculation heavy territory. We are in the realm of alleged black projects, whistleblower claims, weird patents, and research trails that almost connect, but never quite do on paper. What is real and absolutely on the record is this. The U.S. military has poured serious money into human enhancement and future warfare. I'll say it this way, future warfighter research. DARPA has an entire biological technologies office focused on leveraging the power of biology as technology, working on things like brain-computer interfaces, resilience to stress, and programmable biology. You can find their own description of that mission on DARPA.mil under the BTO section. And I'm going to do my best to add these links to the show notes. Multiple countries, not just the U.S., have openly discussed enhancing soldiers. A French military ethics panel in 2020, for example, approved certain forms of augmentation for troops and warned that we must prepare for the arrival of enhanced soldiers. While U.S. defense commentators argued America couldn't afford to ignore that race. You can read about that debate in mainstream defense outlets like Defense One. So that's not fringe. That's not a guy on Reddit. That's the world's most powerful military saying out loud, yeah, we're definitely interested in upgrading humans for war. I think we know this, right? Now layer that on top of the stuff that doesn't sit on public websites, like defense adjacent biotech patents that talk about modulating muscle fibers, stress response, or night vision pathways in ways that start to sound less like medicine and more like weaponized biology. Classified black budgets where billions of dollars move around under vague headlines like advanced capabilities or special programs, and we're never told exactly what those capabilities are. Whispers from contractors and ex-military folks who talk about behavior modification trials, aggression amplification, or strange side effects from experimental drugs and gene therapies tested during the height of the war on terror. Now, somewhere in that fog is where the legend of Project Cerberus lives. According to the story, Cerberus wasn't about silver bullets or guys howling at the moon. It was about something colder and more clinical. Taking everything that makes a predator so efficient, speed, night vision, the raw strength and relentless aggression and trying to splice those traits into a human chassis. Not magic, not a curse, just retroviral delivery systems, gene editing, and animal DNA stitches into human biology in the name of battlefield dominance. I've talked a little bit about this with Dark DNA. You can check out my episode with Nephilim Death Squad, where I delve into a little bit of this. I've got some other podcasts that I was on coming out about it as well. And this all kind of, rhymes, as I say all the time. The rumor says the people behind Cerberus weren't picking animals at random. They weren't asking, can we give soldiers the eyesight of eagles or the lungs of a camel? The obsession was with apex predators, especially canids, wolves, pack hunters, creatures built to chase, corner, and frankly, tear their adversaries apart. And this is where the werewolf myth takes on a new, very uncomfortable flavor. Because if you strip away the folklore, the full moon, the curse, the gothic drama, what you're left with is terrifyingly simple idea. A human being whose biology has been tilted toward predation, not a soldier trained to be more aggressive, a soldier whose genes have been nudged. I always bring this up with the nudged. Cass Sunstein's book, Nudge, talked about it with Nephilim Death Squad. This is weird how this is all kind of aligning. It's a Nudge is a book by Cass Sunstein. And if that sounds impossible, remember, we already use things like viral vectors to deliver new genes into cells. We already edit DNA with tools like CRISPR in labs. And we already perform gene therapy trials on humans for certain diseases. None of this is in the future. It's right now, happening literally right now. The only real question is how far someone somewhere is willing to push it when the work is buried under layers of secrecy and justified in the name of national security. And that's the heart of this episode for tonight. This isn't just a monster story. This is a question. What happens when the warfighter of the future is engineered, not just trained? What does that do to things like consent, ethics, the soul, and the bloodline? And if even a fraction of these Cerberus-style rumors are true, what had to be buried to make room for them? So in this episode, we're going to walk through 3 layers of this thing. The blueprint for a monster, the real documented science and military programs that make Project Cerberus at least plausible on a technical level. The whistleblower trail, the stories, the claims, financial shadows, and odd little data points that have people convinced something like Cerberus either existed or it still does. And then humanity on the line, the spiritual, ethical, and cultural cost of treating the human body as an as a upgradable weapons hardware, and what that means for all of us going forward. By the end, I'm not here to tell you what to believe, okay? Again, I say this almost in every episode. I'm not here to tell you what to believe. I'm here to plant a seed, hence the name of the podcast, Broadcasting Seeds. If the monsters of tomorrow are built in labs, will we even recognize where humanity stops and the weapons begin? So, before we jump in, I'm going to ask you, if you're into this kind of deep dive where folklore, black projects, and spiritual questions all collide, do me a favor, like, share, and review the show wherever you're listening. That's how this thing grows, how more people find these conversations, and how we keep pushing back against the polished, safe version of reality that we're just handed. All right? Let's open the file on Project Cerberus and take a look at what might be lurking just beyond the edge of the official story. Section 1, The Blueprint for a Monster, How the Military Entered the Gene Editing Race. Now, before we even whisper the name Project Cerberus, Cerberus, Jesus, I'm having problems with that. We have to understand the world it supposedly grew out of, a world where science started moving faster than ethics, and where the Department of Defense, now the Department of War, quietly positioned itself to ride that wave. Now, let's rewind to the early 2000s. While most Americans were focused on the war on terror, DARPA, the Pentagon's mad science playground. I mean, I know people that are there, and that's kind of unfair. But either way, the mad science playground was quietly restructuring its biological research efforts. They created an entire office dedicated to what they called leveraging the power of biology as technology. Now, that wasn't vague by accident. It was a new frontier, programmable DNA. I mean, enhanced resilience, neurological augmentation, and the dream of a soldier who could fight longer, heal faster, resist trauma, or even cross psychological boundaries we once thought belonged strictly to the animal kingdom. And they weren't shy about the ambition. I mean, DARPA's own documents openly outline programs exploring genetic modulation of stress responses, neuromuscular enhancement, regenerative biology, brain-computer interfaces. Sounds like somebody else is doing that work too. Programmable viruses for therapeutic gene delivery. Oh, wow. It's weird. What happened here a couple years ago? I mean, all of this is public. Sanitized, maybe, academic, presented in the next step in keeping soldiers alive. But behind the curtain, something else was happening. Military strategists were waking up to a brutal reality. Future conflicts wouldn't be won by numbers. They'd be won by capability. I mean, folks, this is part of my job anyway, I'm not going to go down that road, but the fastest, strongest, most resilient human would no longer be the one who trained hardest. It would be the one whose biology had been rewritten for the battlefield. And here's where things start to shift from plausible science, and they get into the shadowy territory where mythology gets its upgrade. Researchers quickly learned that it wasn't enough to strengthen a human trait. The easiest route to enhanced performance wasn't to build something new. It was to borrow from organisms that already perfected it. This is DNA stuff. Check out my episodes with dark DNA. I will put them in the show notes, and this explains a lot of this. Nature already solved most of the design problems. Night predators with superior low-light vision. Apex hunters with explosive strength and insane endurance. Creatures wired for aggression, speed, tracking, and pack hierarchy. A human soldier can train for these things. True. An apex predator, bottom line is they're born with them. So the question became, not publicly, of course, but inevitably, what would happen if we combined them? Meanwhile, gene editing technology exploded. CRISPR went from fringe molecular tool to global scientific revolution. Labs could suddenly snip DNA, replace sequences, and create hybrid expressions that blurred the line between species. I mean, this wasn't sci-fi anymore. It's not sci-fi anymore. This is happening in universities, biotech startups, and yes, places where government contracts quietly funded dual-use research. Probably have heard that before. Dual-use research. Dr. Foxtrot. That's what I'll say. The name Foxtrot. And then came the ethical shift. By 2010, the international conversation around human augmentation for warfare went from taboo to, well, someone's going to do it, so we better do it first. France said it. China said it. U.S. defense analysts echoed it in policy journals and think tank papers, white papers. The Overton window slid and the door cracked open. Now, picture the mindset inside a secure lab funded by a $1 billion black budget. If the mission is to push human performance beyond natural limits and the tools finally exist and no one outside the program will ever know, what's off limits then? This is where the seeds of Project Cerberus allegedly took root, not as a werewolf fantasy, but as a military calculation. Take the neuroaggression pathways of certain predators. Take the myostatin variants that control muscle density. Take the vision pathways that thrive in near darkness. Use retroviral vectors that insert modified sequences into human genomes. Create a warfighter engineered for close quarters, dominance, supremacy. That's not folklore. And it sure as hell isn't magic. That's science applied without a conscience. That's what that is. Whether anyone ever completed such a project, that's where the speculation begins. But the foundation, come on, human nature, are you kidding me? But the foundation, the technological, political, and military blueprint, now that is freaking absolutely real. And once the blueprint exists, temptation is so close and always right behind it. And to think it's not happening, I don't know. Section 2, The Whistleblower Trail, Stories from the Edges of Project Cerberus. So, if Section 1 was the blueprint, this part is the whispers. None of what I'm about to tell you shows up in clean PDF with a Pentagon letterhead, okay? I have to say that. You won't find Project Cerberus spelled out in a line item next to office supplies. What you get instead are fragments, stories told quietly after a couple drinks, strange overlaps in testimony, and money trails that vanish into something called a black budget. Government funds set aside for classified operations that, by design, never fully see daylight. And if you want to dig the mainstream version of that, you can look up the U.S. black budget breakdown revealed in 2013, where tens of billions were shown flowing into intelligence and covert programs with almost no public detail. That's the official fog. Now let's talk about what people claim is hiding inside it. I'm going to start with the contractor in the desert. One story that pops up again and again in slightly different forms goes something like this. A biomedical contractor, we'll call them Mark, is deployed to a forward operating base somewhere in the Middle East during the height of the war on terror. Officially, his job is, it's boring, man. Monitor stress markers, collect blood samples from units cycling through combat rotations, help test fatigue countermeasures, and performance enhancers. I mean, nothing about that is really that shocking. I mean, considering the problems like that we've got with post-traumatic stress and all these issues that are costing millions, billions of dollars in after effects from the last 20 years of war, right? With post-traumatic stress, TBI, all these other things. We know the military has run all kinds of trials on stimulants, self-regulation drugs, experimental therapies on volunteers in uniform. I mean, this is not conspiracy. That's documented history. But Mark claims that buried inside the normal work, there was a subset of participants whose files were handled, we'll call it differently. They had different barcodes, different storage. Their samples were boxed separately, shipped under special courier, never logged into the same databases. These particular soldiers, he says, weren't just being monitored. He says that they were being tuned. He remembers odd instructions. Quote, flag any unusual changes in aggression, healing rates, or muscle density. Report increasing hostility, but don't mention it directly in the standard log. Route it to this separate channel. At first, he chalks it up to some classified psych trial, maybe a new anti-anxiety drug with bad side effects. Then one night, a squad gets flown in after a messy operation. One of the guys supposedly involved in the special cohort is sitting on a cot, shirt off, getting stitched up. Mark notices something strange, and the wound, he says the wound doesn't look right for how fresh it is. The edges were already like knitting faster than he's used to seeing. And the soldier's eyes were locked in this cold, fixed stare, hyper alert, but not quite present, like the fight hasn't turned off in him yet. Mark tries to talk to him, and the guy responds, but the way he describes the engagement sets off Mark's alarm bells. They broke, we chased. I don't remember stopping. It's like I could smell them. Smell them? Is that combat stress talking? Like adrenaline? A man trying to process what he just did? Probably. I mean, almost certainly. But put yourself in Mark's shoes. You've watched months of weird sample handling, quiet instructions about aggression profiles, and now you're looking at a soldier who seems to be healing too quickly and describing a hunt like an animal tracking prey. If you're already inclined to be suspicious, your mind goes straight to the darkest explanation. And that's exactly what happens in these whistleblower narratives. Normal, unexplainable events get pulled into a larger, more ominous frame. I mean, are they proof of Cerberus? No. But they're the kind of stories that keep that alive. The next narrative we've got is the three-headed budget. The name Cerberus, the three-headed hound. All right, so we'll get into exactly what Cerberus is for those that don't know Greek mythology. The three-headed hound, or haven't watched Harry Potter. The three-headed hound that guards the underworld shows up most often not in lab notes, but in the way some people describe the structure of the alleged program. According to one former analyst who claimed to have worked adjacent to enhancement projects, Cerberus wasn't a single experiment. It was a cluster of efforts. One head focused on genetic and retrieval manipulation, things like altering muscle recovery, stress hormones, and dealing with pain, like pain tolerances. Another looked at neurological conditioning, pairing biology with tech, like wearables and neural interfaces to shape behavior and response. And then the third head handled containment and deniability, burying costs in intelligence funds, relabeling trials as injury rehabilitation, and making sure nothing ever traced cleanly back to one program name. This is where black budget comes back in. Intelligence and defense spending documents that were leaked in 2013 showed tens of billions of dollars going into classified programs every year. Not all of that is exotic science. Most of it, frankly, is just surveillance operations and hardware. But the scale of secrecy creates a perfect hiding place for something like Cerberus to exist as a tiny sliver of a much larger machine. And on the biology side of the house, that same era is when DARPA's Biological Technologies Office fully came online, consolidating gene editing, neuroscience, synthetic biology, and human performance work all up under one roof. You can read their mission in totality, unspooky language, at the DARPA website. And again, I'm going to do my best to add these show notes to the show notes. It's all about leveraging biological properties and processes to protect warfighters and reshaping biotechnology for technological advantage. Nothing about werewolves. Nothing about animal DNA. But if you're a suspicious mind, you look at that and say, if I were going to hide a werewolf bloodline experiment, this is exactly where I'd tuck that paperwork. Is that fair? I mean, maybe not, but this is how conspiracy narratives form. Real secrecy, real money, real cutting-edge biology, plus a lot of unanswered questions in a culture that lies all the time and has lied before and is going to continue to lie. The pattern of the stories. One thing I've noticed when you read enough into alleged Cerberus accounts is that and it's not just Cerberus, it's other things too, that they follow a pattern. Different bases, different time frames, and different people. But the beats are the same. Like I say, in everything, it all rhymes. Hyper-aggressive test subjects who seem to flip into a different gear under stress. Odd healing or endurance anecdotes that don't quite line up with normal physiology. Weird administrative behavior. Medical files pulled, separate storage, special couriers, non-disclosure agreements, and NDAs signed everywhere. And then, almost always, a cleanup phase where people are rotated out, programs are renamed, or everybody is told, that trial's over. Don't ask questions. None of these details on their own prove anything, right? Taken together, they create a story shape that people recognize as Cerberus, a three-headed system built to create, observe, and then bury something that was never supposed to exist. And it leaves us with a haunting possibility. Maybe there never was a single werewolf soldier howling at the moon. Maybe that's just the folklore version. Maybe what really happened, if anything did, right, was quieter, more incremental, small, there we go again, nudges to aggression, to recovery, to fear response, enough to make a human more predator than man in key moments, then send him home and pretend nothing changed. If that's the case, the question isn't just, did Project Cerberus exist? The question becomes, if you alter a person at a biological level for war, did you ever really turn that off? Do you? Do you ever really turn it off? And what does that do to the human being, their family, their future bloodline? Oh my God, I've been talking about. That's where we're going to go next. Section 3, Humanity on the Line, the moral and spiritual cost of building a super predator soldier. Imagine a room somewhere deep underground, fluorescent lights humming, reinforced doors sealed, everything bolted down and sanitized. On the whiteboard is a list of traits: strength, aggression, night vision, pain tolerance, and bone density. There's no mythological language, no talk of beasts or curses, just bullet points, just capability enhancement. Because that's how these things always start, not with monsters, but with metrics. But at some point, whether anyone admits it or not, the question hanging in the air becomes, what are we turning a human being into? The old temptation. If you go back through history, ancient, medieval, modern, the pattern never changes. When a society is afraid and when war is on the horizon, when leaders think their survival is at stake, the boundaries of ethics start to bend. Ancient kings sent warriors into blood-soaked rituals for divine power. The Spartans bent children into weapons. The Nazis twisted science into an abomination factory. Let's just call it that. The Cold War produced LSD trials, mind control experiments, and biological research nobody wanted to talk about. Every era thinks it's too enlightened. We're too enlightened to repeat those mistakes. And every freaking era is wrong. So when you place genetic engineering, retroviral vectors, and predator trait splicing on the table, and you tell a nation we're falling behind the next superpower, you create the same crucible that forged every ethical disaster in history. Period. What happens when you change the blueprint? Let's imagine for a moment that Cerberus was real, that it is real, not the Hollywood version, not a guy with fangs and glowing eyes, but the subtle version, the scientific version, changing hormone receptors, tweaking aggression pathways, strengthening fast twitch muscle fibers, dampening empathy in high stress situations, enhancing tracking instincts, sharpening sensory perception at night. Do all that, and you might never see a monster on the outside. And the uniform fits the same. The salute looks the same. The voice, the smile, the handshake, all the same. But something deep in the DNA is shifted. Something primal wakes up. A soldier becomes faster, harder to stop, more relentless. But what happens when they go home? What happens when they hold their child? What happens when the on switch never fully turns off? These are the questions nobody in a lab coat wants to answer, because war has a finish line. Biological alteration, it freaking doesn't. And once you introduce a gene into a human gene germline, intentionally or accidentally, it doesn't vanish. It passes on. It can mutate. It can grow in future generations in ways no scientist, no general, no government politician can fully predict. The ghost of Cerberus doesn't howl. It inherits. It inherits. Now, the spiritual weight of that, I mean, this is broadcasting seeds. So let's pull back the curtain even further. Long before modern science, ancient texts warned about tampering with creation, altering the image, crossing the boundaries between species, defying the order set at the foundation of life. Whether you interpret those stories literally, symbolically, or somewhere in between, they all point to the same warning. When humans try to become gods, the price is always paid in bloodlines. The Nephilim stories, the hybrid creatures in ancient myth, the tales of giants and beasts. They aren't just folklore, folks. I'm sorry to tell you that. They're cautionary tales about the spiritual consequences of blending that was never meant to be blended, and specifically forbidden to be blended. Because what is a human without humanity? And what is humanity without the spirit? If you create a soldier who is part predator, part man, even just in temperament or biology, who shepherds that soul? Who teaches it discipline, kindness, restraint? Who helps it understand suffering? Who prays over it? If you weaponize instinct, you are responsible for every life that it touches. And if you bury that responsibility under classified programs and burned paperwork, the spiritual debt doesn't disappear. Someone, someday, pays it. And the real horror isn't the monster. The scariest thing about Project Cerberus and things like it isn't the image of a werewolf soldier sprinting through the battlefield. The real horror is that we might already be building things we can't spiritually, ethically, or genetically control. I'd say that we probably are. And the people making those decisions may never face the consequences. The ones who will suffer are the soldiers, like me, like my friends, whose bodies become battlegrounds. Their families, like my kids and my wife and my friends' kids and their wives, who live with the aftershocks. The children who inherit unpredictable traits. The society that eventually meets the creation and doesn't recognize its own freaking reflection. When you start altering the blueprint of humanity, even in small, experimentally harmless ways, you're no longer waging war on a foreign enemy. You're waging war on the very idea of what a human being is. And once that line is crossed, man, there's no treaty, there's no ceasefire, no diplomatic bullshit back channeling that can uncross it. You can stop a program, but you can't stop a gene. So what do we do with all this? This is emotional. It gets me emotional because it just does. Maybe Project Cerberus was never real, but I have to say that things like it, maybe not that name, maybe something, they absolutely are happening. Maybe it was a handful of unrelated research past that conspiracy-minded people stitched together in a single shadow project. Maybe every whistleblower was misinterpreting what they saw. Maybe the werewolf imagery is just our way of making sense of scientific concepts, too unsettling to talk about plainly. Or maybe this is the seed I'll leave you with tonight. The truth is somewhere in the freaking middle, and we all know it. Maybe we're not dealing with monsters in a literal sense. Maybe we're dealing with the parts of ourselves we'd rather not face. Our hunger for power, our fear of falling behind as a country, our willingness to bend morality when someone in a uniform says it's for national security, or our desire to build something unstoppable, even if it means sacrificing the humanity of the people who wield it. Because every secret program starts with a justification. I mean, the Nazis did, the Russians did, the Chinese did, we did with the nuclear bomb. Protect the country, stay ahead of the enemy, win the war before it begins. But every justification ends the same way. We didn't realize what we were becoming until it was too late. If even a fraction of Cerberus ever existed, even if it was just an experiment, a prototype, a whiteboard sketch, then we've already crossed a threshold. Not because of what was created, but because of what was willing to be created. That's the part we have to pay attention to. As long as a powerful institution believes enhanced soldiers are inevitable, as long as gene editing keeps advancing, as long as black budgets remain untraceable and exist in general, as long as we keep pretending ethics can wait until after the war, Cerberus and things like it are going nowhere. They're not going anywhere. It's not a beast in a cage. It's a freaking mindset, a temptation. A door cracked open and a hand hovering over the light switch. And all of us, knowingly or not, will live with whatever steps through that doorway. If tonight's episode stirred something in you, if it planted a question, I apologize for my zeal. If it planted a curiosity or even a little discomfort, which it should, do me a favor. Like the show, share it with someone who loves digging into the shadows, and do me another favor, leave a review wherever you're listening. That's the simplest way to keep broadcasting seeds growing and keep pushing back against the curated version of reality that most people never question. Again, I'm Bennett Tanton. Thanks for diving into the unknown with me. And until next time, Stay curious, stay ready, and don't ignore the shadows. They're trying to tell you something. I promise.
They said trust the process. They didn't say what it turned me into. Smile with the needle hand, sign right here, be a better man, upgrade body, upgrade brain, cut the fear, amplify pain. They talk clean in a dead cold room, no fingerprints, just doom and bloom. Numbers don't scream when bones break down, they just log results and shut it down. Bloodline altered, code rewritten, nobody asked if the soul was missing. Built for the fight, bred for the dark, flip the switch, let instinct spark. You call it progress, I call it theft. Took what was human, left what's left. You pushed too far, now you don't know me. You crossed that line, now you can't control me. You don't build a weapon and call it a man. You don't wake the beast and shake my hand. 3 heads locked at the gates of hell. You can bury the files, but the blood still yells. Heartbeat thumps like a war drum. Night vision kicks,